You've probably been down the rabbit hole of best router lists, only to end up wondering if any of those devices will actually survive the chaos of a busy office, a mobile workshop, or a remote site that needs a steady connection without the hassle of a wired line. The fear of spending a good chunk of money on something that looks impressive on paper but turns into a constant source of tickets and downtime is real. What you really need is a piece of hardware that simply works the way you expect it to, day in and day out, and that doesn't force you to become a network engineer just to keep it running. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's talk about the Cradlepoint E300 C7C, a router that promises Wi-Fi 6, built-in 4G LTE, and a wall-mountable design, all packaged for small to medium businesses that can't rely on a traditional ISP line. First off, who is this router actually built for? If you run a branch office in a strip mall, a pop-up retail kiosk, a construction crew that needs connectivity on a job site, or a small call center that can't afford a full-blown fiber contract, the E300 C7C hits a sweet spot. It's meant for environments where you need a reliable fallback or primary connection that isn't tethered to a wall outlet in a data center. On the flip side, if you're a home user who just wants to stream a few shows and check email, or a data center admin looking for a chassis-scale solution with dozens of 10 GBE ports, you'll quickly find this device either overkill or underspec. The first practical strength that becomes evident once you unbox it is the simplicity of the mounting options. The unit comes with a sturdy wall plate and all the hardware you need to bolt it onto a rack, a pole, or a standard 19-inch rack shelf. In real-world terms, that means you can place it right next to a power source in a utility closet and keep the antenna cables neat and out of the way. I've seen a handful of field technicians complain about routers that have to sit on a desk, taking up precious space and becoming accidental trip hazards. The E300 C7C avoids that by design. Next, the built-in 4G LTE modem is where the value really starts to show. Most routers in this price range either require an external dongle or a separate cellular gateway, which adds extra cabling, extra power draw, and another point of failure. The E300 C7C integrates the modem right into the chassis, so you just pop in a SIM card, configure the APN, and you're online. In a scenario where a small retail shop loses its broadband due to a construction outage, the router can automatically switch to the cellular link without any manual intervention, keeping the POS system and security cameras live. That kind of set-it-and-forget-it reliability is why many businesses choose Cradlepoint in the first place. However, there are trade-offs hidden behind that convenience. The LTE module supports up to Category 7 speeds, which translates to roughly 300 megabits per second down and 50 megabits per second up in ideal conditions. That's plenty for most point-of-sale or office applications, but if you're trying to run heavy video conferencing streams from multiple stations, you may start to feel the ceiling, especially if the cellular signal is only 3G or 4GLO. The router does offer a WAN port for a wired broadband backup, but you'll need to have that secondary line already in place, which some truly remote sites simply don't have. Wi-Fi 6 is another headline feature, and it does bring the expected improvements in device density and latency. In a test office with about 20 laptops, a handful of IoT sensors, and a couple of tablets, the network stayed responsive even when multiple devices were streaming video at the same time. The practical upside here is that you can place a few access points around a small floor and still have the router handle the traffic without constantly dropping connections. That said, the E300 C7C only has a single internal Wi-Fi antenna array, so coverage is limited to a typical office-sized room. If you need to blanket an entire floor or a warehouse, you'll still need external access points wired back to the router, which adds cost and complexity. Another point worth mentioning is the software side. Cradlepoint bundles its Net Cloud service with the router, and the base subscription is included for a year. This cloud portal lets you push firmware updates, monitor signal strength, and set up failover policies from anywhere. For a business that has a handful of sites and no dedicated IT staff, the ability to manage everything remotely is a huge time saver. The downside is that after the initial year, you'll have to pay a recurring subscription to keep those features active. If you're comfortable managing the device manually via the local web UI, you could skip the subscription, but you'll lose the convenience of automated alerts and remote diagnostics. Power consumption is modest, about 12 W at full load, which means you can run it off a UPS without blowing the battery in a few hours. In practice, that gives you a decent window to keep